Hello everyone, welcome. This is another episode on the series of Mental Health for Beginners. This is Feel, Grow, Live. If you're here for the first time, my name is Evelina, I'm an ex-therapist and I run this channel to help people understand themselves, be more self-aware, find answers to their question about what their life is about. So this is a series about mental health, very generic for beginners. So if you have all your answers and if you sort of have quite a strong, stable sense of self, this is not for you. This is for people who are at the beginning of their journey, who are beginning to investigate their inner experience, beginning to ask themselves questions. What am I about? How can I do better, be better, progress in life, really have control over my life? And even though we have lots of information, knowledge, different sort of therapeutic style, a lot of free content, coaching, and we can talk about mindset, we can talk about different sort of achieving goals, but the reality is, for a lot of people, just going through a day, a month or a week or whatever is quite challenging, because today's world is really overwhelming. And our mind is one of those entry points to us. So we watch a lot of things, we consume a lot of things, we are exposed to a lot of things. And the truth is, this is all very overwhelming for us. Yeah, we have no control over how these things impact us. We might think we do, but I want to talk to you about what really mental health is and what it isn't. In traditional mainstream therapy or psychology, people would refer to mental health issues as personality disorders or anxiety, depression, etc. If you have heard me before, I don't think depression and anxiety are disorders. There are responses of the nervous system to your experiences. They don't happen randomly. And sort of their purpose, their meaning is very unique to each person. When I'm anxious and I can't concentrate and I become very frazzled, it's really on a case-to-case basis as to what it means in a given moment, right? The same with depression. Depression is very often an outcome of some difficult experiences. Sometimes it's grieving, sometimes it's just a time off from the world. So to me, and I'm an ex-therapist, so I've seen stuff and I've worked with people with a lot of trauma. Depression and anxiety are the sort of the message from your nervous system, from your deeper self, to start paying attention to yourself, right? So I think you can have anxiety and be very mentally healthy. So I'm going to elaborate on that. So when it comes to mental health, what is really not being said is that it's a combination of your psychological health, your cognitive health, so how you think about yourself and the world, and your mental health, and your sense of self, right? So this is a combination. So there are a lot of layers to mental health, right? And mental health is not really mental. That's one of my slogans, because mental health and everything within us doesn't happen in a vacuum and for no reason. It's always an extension of your nervous system and your experiences. So one of the things that is happening globally from what I can see is that we have totally pathologized our inner experience, and we think that when something is going on within us, which is very often, as I said, a result, an outcome of your experiences rather than some random thing, we tend to ignore it, we tend to power through. We are being told that we need to buckle up, be stronger and push through, which is exactly the opposite to what we should be really doing with ourselves. I want you to ask yourself a question: what mental health really means to you, because it's a very, very individual thing. This is what is not being said. right? What mental health means for someone. In general, we can talk about being balanced, okay? Being balanced and seeing yourself capable, seeing yourself in a positive life. So having a strong, healthy sense of self, and not being strong and being able to power through everything, because sometimes actually falling apart and having a crisis, it's a sign of health, right? Because it's like pretending that nothing has happened. We are emotional beings. We have our psychology, we have our nervous system. So if you are able to go through life without having any sort of crisis or difficult moments, and you are able to go through everything and have all your experiences of loss, rejection, betrayal, overwhelm, without actually responding to it in a way and processing it and unpacking it, that is a sign of being a psychopath, because we are feelable beings. So if you having trouble understanding yourself, that tells me and is a sign of health, right? Trying to understand yourself, how you operate and how your mind works and who you truly are under the layers of all your roles you play and under the layer of your job. It's really a crucial thing, crucial dimension to being human. Okay, and even though obviously in the mainstream understanding and in the mainstream conversation, I don't really know what the mainstream is anymore, but mainstream understanding, people don't talk about the soul. You know, I did psychology degree, I trained as a therapist, and I wasn't taught about the soul. I wasn't told that everyone has a unique path. It was very sort of boxy and definition based. There were very few teachers who could actually explore this sort of dimension, but it was all about, you know, reading books and theories and a lot of practical stuff as well. But it wasn't until I started working with people where I actually sat with human pain, with very difficult experiences, until I understood that what happened in our heads is really a result of the experience rather than some, you know, cluster of symptoms, and then we define these symptoms as a label, right? Which, I mean, diagnosis. So going back a bit, I want you to think about what mental health means for you, right? And I would like to define it as having a healthy, balanced sense of self. So what does it mean? It means knowing who you are and who you are not, having an autonomous sense of self, so being able to make decisions for yourself, connect with yourself as to what you want out of life, in life, what kind of relationships you want to have, what kind of family you want to have, whether you want to have a family or not. So having a really robust understanding as to what you are about. If things are going on in your mind which you don't like, and sometimes they're sort of obstacles to be where you want to be, to get where you want to get in life, then that requires you to have an inner inquiry and to really investigate yourself and to really discern as to what to pay attention and what not to pay attention to. Because you are exposed to so much information, the shows you're watching, the podcasts you're watching, the stuff you're being exposed to, it all goes in. I call it a mental diet, right? And with every single piece of content that you're exposing yourself to, there's an emotional charge. So you are being manipulated for good and for bad, right? Things make you feel something. Things you watch, things you consume just as food, right? So if you're thinking that it doesn't matter, I really want you to question that. because it does matter, because your mind is an entry point to you, to who you are. And it's impossible not to be overwhelmed today if you don't choose what to watch and what kind of content you want to consume, what kind of people you want to hang out around. It's impossible to be stable today. It's impossible to make simple decisions, right? When I talk about balanced sense of self, what I mean by this is having a sense of self that you are the same as everyone else. So not having this sort of superiority syndrome where you're better than everyone else, but also not having this, I am less than anyone else. I am worthy of less. I don't deserve as many things as other people, because we are all equals, right? So that would be one of the very first thing if you want to investigate your sense of self, which I highly recommend you do it. Think about yourself where you are on the dimension of being better than everyone or less than everyone else around you, right? So yes, people might be more eloquent, people might be more intelligent, people might be, they have more money than you, or they have a better career, but essentially, and you might be one of those people when you think, oh, you know, I've done so well for myself and so I must be better than everyone else. Well, that might be the case, but when it comes to your true self, you are equal to everybody else, right? And I know a lot of people, and you probably do as well, who are apparently very self-conscious. I have been to a lot of different therapies, they've worked on themselves, right? And they claim to be more awakened, more conscious of themselves, more self-aware, but when you challenge them, or when something doesn't go their way, or they're in a relationship when they required to say sorry, or they were required to sort of be authentic human, they're not capable of doing that, right? So one of the things that happens today is that everyone pretends, because everyone pretends they know what they're talking about. They know how to be human, they know what it means to have a good life, and they crack the code. Like, if someone says they crack the code, that's a red flag for me, and it should be for you too. Because the nature of life is that the only constant thing is change, and you are the most malleable, plastic, changeable, organic creature on earth. So what you are today, you might not be this person tomorrow, right? And there's obviously, life happens, relationships happen, they fall apart, there are illnesses, there are crises. And, you know, unless you can actually respond to life as it comes and be okay with it and see yourself as a capable, not more or less than anyone, then there's some work to be done. You need to work on yourself. You know, mental health is not about not having anxiety. It's the most natural thing to be anxious, right? It's the most natural thing to be depressed, because these are the very natural responses of the nervous system. And if you lose someone, it's the most natural thing to be depressed. And what happens in the mainstream society is that you go to your doctor and you get antidepressants, but that simply means that you're just numbing your pain, which you're supposed to really be with, right? You're supposed to be with yourself. And I'm not saying there is no place for medication, of course there is. And it's sometimes very helpful and necessary for people to take medication, but inner work is very important. And that inner work cannot happen when you are overwhelming yourself with consuming stuff all the time and you're thinking, yeah, I need to read that. Or you completely disconnecting from the fact that you need to learn about yourself. You need to really investigate yourself. You need to be self-aware. If you want something out of life, you need to understand your experiences. You need to be able to make sense out of your experiences, because again, a lot of things that we go through, especially as children, we learn to detach from it. We learn to suppress it. But it doesn't go anywhere. We just detach and disconnect from ourselves, from our resources. And of course we adapt, because as children we have no choices as to what to do with what's going on around us, especially if stuff which goes around us is very difficult and horrible. So yeah, the health of your mind is really on you. The reason that you're not happy is maybe because you haven't defined what happiness is for you, right? And also I want to talk to you about self-deception. Your mind, which has one of the main forces in your mind, is your ego, and everyone has an ego. Ego is not a negative thing. The ego will persuade you that it's fine, it's okay, everybody is doing it. And it's very difficult. We get caught up in this rationalizing, we keep explaining to ourselves that things are okay, that we're being treated okay, or it is okay to harm yourself in whatever way, chemically, physically, or through other behaviors, or, various substances or whatever. There is a thing called self-deception. And your mind is very good at that. Your ego is very good at that, right? I'll be talking about the ego in future episodes. But yeah, ask yourself those very important questions as to what does it mean for you to be healthy, the health of your mind? Because it's also knowing that not everything your mind produces is true. Whether you're feeling a lot of emotions or whether you're feeling nothing at all, it's knowing that none of these are true, because we can really fabricate a lot of stuff. We live this identity. We are being really hijacked by a lot of different narratives all the time, right? Oh, this is normal, or that's okay to be doing that, or you shouldn't be doing that. All the time you're being bombarded with various narratives. And one of the best things you can do for yourself is learn to detach from that and give yourself a bit of space for your own thinking to kick in and for your inner voice to get healthy, right? So it's all about having a healthy relationship with yourself, having understanding who you are. But when you are experiencing depression or anxiety or some other relentless inner states, because it's relentless, you see, you're being hijacked constantly, and maybe you grew up in a very difficult set of circumstances, then that becomes your identity. So it's all about creating a bit of space for yourself where you can really start questioning, is this true? Is this really what I think about myself? When it comes to emotions and carrying a lot of sadness, and that happens a lot these days because what's going on around the world is really sad, but being consumed by it, it's not really a good strategy for life. Having empathy, yes, but also you need to start with yourself. You need to start prioritizing yourself and prioritizing your sense of self. Having moments in the day where you take a break from everything. Of course, put on your favorite music or whatever, but try not to consume stuff, because it all speaks to your subconscious mind and it all affirms as your narrative. That's your algorithm, right? So you have a psychological profile and the outside world knows about it, right? And that's your algorithm. So you need to become your own algorithm. You need to really healthily detach from it. You detach from it anyway, so because your brain is not able to process all of it. So there comes a point where people just become totally numb to what they're hearing or listening to, They can't remember anything because their capacity has been reached totally. The only protection you have against what's going on and against how this is all becoming all-encompassing is becoming conscious every day and practicing being aware of what's going on, and then making a choice whether you want to participate in it or not, whether you want to get involved in the drama, the pain, the fear, or whether you want to become autonomous over your own choices, right? Because if you engage in the anger, in the frustration, in the sadness on a daily basis, it will consume you. It's all an encompassing experience, right? And that's a very known thing by media and everyone who's producing anything. It's all about grabbing you. It's all about catching your attention. It's all about grabbing you by the throat and making you rageful, right? Because that sells and that keeps your attention, and your attention is the currency here. Right? So the fact that even though we have so much help, so much information about mental health, so much knowledge in neuropsychology, it does come down to very simple practices that only you can perform in order for you to get some breathing space, to get some distance from all of it. Because what is happening, your mind is hijacked. There's no way you're not going to feel anxious if you watch material about the war, or if you watch someone argue for 3 hours or have a debate on the podcast, right? And now entertainment is about ripping people apart emotionally, psychologically, and being right all the time, etc. Right? Everyone is virtue signaling, whether it's in a political dimension. It's all very polarizing. So you're being pulled in a lot of different directions. And in the meantime, your true self is being suppressed. Your dreams, who you are, what brings you joy, what makes you grow, what makes your life better, it's fading away. It's on the periphery of your attention. It's about food for thought. Like, I want you to think about it, and I want people to sort of wake up to what is being done to them mentally, right? And very often when people came to me in therapy, when I've listened about their day or their week, I was already exhausted. We are not here to be forcing ourselves, to be rushing through life, to be overwhelmed constantly, because where's actually a chance for your nervous system to have a proper rest? Why do so many people have problems sleeping? Because their nervous system is in overdrive or underdrive if they're depressed, right? Anxiety is all about having too much energy in the system and the nervous system being like gearing up for fight, flight, freeze or fawn, and depression is collapse, right? I've had enough. I need to go in hiding because I'm burned, right? It's very often a burnout from everything. So it's up to you. If you don't make those choices will be made for you. The game where you could disconnect from everything, where you could go back home and have 6 hours of awake time, but you were the sort of the decision-making agent in your life, that's over. We're not going back to that. So it's really about you becoming conscious. Who's got the remote control to your mind? Who is making decisions for you, right? Who is making decisions as to what goes in, what sort of content and mental diet, what emotions do you consume on an everyday basis? Just the overwhelm, the sheer volume of things can make your nervous system to shut down. That's why you're exhausted all the time, right? That's why you're exhausted after watching stuff for that many hours, because even though people say, oh, I just need a bit of reset time. That's not a reset. Unless you watch, I don't know, you're bird watching or something, right? Which you're not, as we know. So we live in the world where it's time for each one of us to wake up to what we're doing to ourselves and what we're allowing to be done to us with our minds, with our psyche, with our sense of self. Do we have boundaries? It's becoming all about protecting ourselves from this sort of having some boundaries around who is allowed, what is allowed to enter your mind, to enter your body, right? This is the same with food. You're not going to be eating everything that is being served to you. You need to be the one who knows what's good for you, what do you actually need, how much of it you need. And there are different medicines for the mind. Sometimes it's information, so obviously doing research is good, but not endlessly. There's a time where you need to actually integrate it into practices, when you need to practice being present for yourself, when you need to practice meditation. And I'm not talking about any sort of technique. I'm talking about contemplating yourself, trying to understand yourself, understand your mind. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Emotionally, what world do you want to be surrounded with? Because it all starts with you. You create the ripple effect, right? So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Give me a like or comment on what you've just heard. I also have a course about that. It's called Mechanics of Mental Health. Check it out, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.